Welcome to our Air Grammy Virtual Remembrance Assembly 2021. It's lovely to have so many parents, adults and members of our community joining us online, along with all the classes of Air Grammar who are joining us from their own classrooms today to remember.
Our school building has a rich history, dating back to 1602, having been Air Academy for many years. Much of our virtual assembly will come from our memorial hall.
A hall dedicated as a memorial to World War I and all those affected by the conflict.
Today we will remember the people who fought for our country and sacrificed their lives so that we can have freedom and are able to live in peace.
The world over, people still remember 11 o'clock on the 11th of November, which is the time that the guns fell silent and the First World War ended in 1918. This is remembrance of Armistice Day.
On the Sunday near the 11th November, communities up and down the country have a ceremony at their war memorial to remember all those who have given their lives in all the wars since the First World War.
This year, Remembrance Sunday is Sunday the 14th of November, and 2 Primary 7 pupils will attend the Act of Remembrance ceremony at the Air War Memorial in Wellington Square and lay a poppy wreath on behalf of Grammar Primary.
The poppy is a symbol of remembrance because of the battlefield in a place called Flanders where many soldiers were killed during the First World War. After the war was over, poppies grew there. The red also symbolises the blood shed by those who gave their lives protecting our country and our way of life.
Hannah and Ellie would now like to read a poem about poppies that we felt was appropriate for today.
The Inquisitive Mind of a Child, author unknown. Why are they selling poppies, Mummy, selling poppies in town today? The poppies, my child, are flowers of love for the men who marched away. But why have they chosen a poppy, Mummy? Why not a beautiful rose? Because, my child, men fought and died in the fields when poppies grow. But why are the poppies so red, Mummy? Why are the poppies so red? Red is the colour of blood, my child, the blood that our soldiers shed. The heart of the poppy is black, Mummy. Why does it have to be black? Black, my child, is a symbol of grief for the men who never came back. But why, Mummy, are you crying so? Your tears give me pain. My tears are my fears for you, my child, for the world is forgetting again.
In remembering, we also think about the impact of war. We think about the pain and the heartache, not only the people in war, but the families back home. The loss of family and friends causes so much pain and anger.
We think of the turmoil that war causes to communities, countries and our wider world.
It's also time to think about the strength shown by our armed forces in defending our way of life at a great personal cost. If our armed forces didn't show bravery, our country wouldn't be what it is today. A land where we have freedom to owe a huge thanks to those who showed strength and bravery and gave their lives to protect our way of life.
The brave men and women of our armed forces who have died in all wars since the First World War sacrificed their lives to keep us safe.
They gave their today for our tomorrow. By us stopping to remember the impact of war, we hope that we can learn from the mistakes of the past and maybe war will not happen so readily in the future.
A group of P6s would now like to sing a song that we felt was appropriate for today. Please listen closely and reflect on the words of the song and images that appear.
Love our problems disappear. But all in all, we soon discover that 1 and 1 is all belong to you.
Remembrance is also about remembering more than just 2 world wars, but also all the other wars that have happened across the world since the First World War.
Wars like the Korean War, the Gulf War, Afghanistan, and the conflicts in Syria and Iraq.
Here in our atrium stands a memorial built to honour the memory of all former pupils and staff in Air Academy who fell in the First World War.
What strikes me when I look at this memorial is the sheer number of names there are on it, showing us the huge impact that this war had on ordinary lives of the people who once walked in the halls of this, our school building.
In studying World War I last term, P6 also looked at the wider subject of war. We would like to share with you today a statistic that we found incredibly hard to take in and very sobering.
Looking at all of recorded history, only 8% of all those years have been peaceful. In 92% of these years, man has been at war. In the 20th century alone, 108 million people were killed because of war.
Primary 6 have been studying the First World War, which ended exactly 103 years ago today.
At the time when the First World War broke out, people's understanding of what war was like was very different than our own. There was no television to show people what was happening, and people had a notion of war that recognised how noble it was to fight for our country, and the end listing was to fight would be making of you.
This idea of what war was like largely ignored any thought of suffering, pain and death. It was only when people fighting in the First World War wrote of their experiences in letters home to their family and in poems that people began to realise just what war actually meant.
They began to understand that war meant suffering and it meant death. As part of our work on World War I, Primary 6 studied what life was like in the trenches.
In Literacy P6 have been studying the use of emotive language. Macy and Merrin will now each read their fictional letters from the trenches that they wrote for today.
My dear Lizzie, it has been 5 days since I got your letter. Later today I'm going over the top, and only God knows who will make it out alive. James died yesterday. That could have so easily been me. I don't know how I've made it this far with the poor conditions. As I sit here with the rats and hearing shells exploding, I think about how this war has separated us and how I can't spend Christmas with my dearest wife. The past few months have been rough and I worry if I will ever get to see you again. I wish we could just spend one last day together listening to the radio and eating your delicious homemade Bakewell tarts. Seeing all these young men die for a few feet of land makes me wonder, what is the point of this war? They told us that the war would be over by Christmas, but I can't see this cruel war ever ending. I love you always, Harry.
To my beloved wife, I am writing to you so that I can reassure you that all is well. Although I am not as comfortable as I would like to be, I have to remember that it could be worse. I could be dead. Besides, it will all be over soon. I'll be home very soon. Just wait and see. Tell the kids that when I get home I will tell them all about it. The weather has been awful, but it doesn't make things much harder. Believe it or not, we have plenty of things to do to keep us entertained. We have cards, dominoes, little magic shows, and if we have the space, football. Although things aren't great without you, things are going surprisingly well. No one that I know has died. It's most likely that they just got lost through these deep trenches. Tell the kids that they shouldn't worry. I'll be home soon. Maybe in our next move I'll be closer to home. Today has been a good day, dear. The last thing that I want is for you to worry. Tonight, make my favourite meal for supper, steak pie and sausages. I must go now. I love you more than you know.
Ailey will now tell us a little about one army officer's experience and how that experience helped to change our understanding and has helped generations of people to remember.
On the 3rd of May 1915, an officer of the Canadian Army was sitting on the rear step of an ambulance. He was looking at the grave of his friend
and brother-in-arms Alexis Helmer, killed in action the day before. He sees beds of blood-red poppies growing among the graves of the burial grounds. He begins to write the first words of what is now a famous poem, "In Flanders Fields the poppies blow." The poet was Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae. "In Flanders Fields" became the most popular poem of that time, but McCrae would not live to see the poppies of Flanders Fields grow into an international symbol of remembrance. He did not live to see peace. He died of meningitis on the 28th of January 1918, while World War I was still raging. To this day, people all around the world wear a poppy as a token of remembrance, to remember the brave men and women of our armed forces who have fought for our freedom and shed their blood to preserve our way of life.
Many of us here today are wearing poppies to help you remember.
The poppy is a flower that seems to be able to grow where there is rubble or where the ground is often disturbed.
It's quite a contrast that out of the ugliness and destruction of war grew the simple beauty of nature in the bright red poppy.
In Flanders Fields by John McCrae. In Flanders Fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row and row, that mark our place, and in the sky the lark still bravely singing, flies scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt on, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take off our quarrel with the foe, take you from failing hands before, the torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep though those poppies grow in Flanders Fields.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. Because a vision softly creeping left its seats while I was sleeping. And the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of
We would now like to move our Virtual Remembrance Day Assembly to Air War Memorial in Wellington Square.
On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, fighting in the First World War stopped. That time is chosen as a time to stop and remember to reflect on the sacrifice made for us, to protect our way of life, our freedom.
We would like to have a 2-minute silence today as part of our Remembrance Assembly. We ask that during this silence you don't make any sound and that you use the time to reflect on the things that we have been talking about today and to remember all those who have given their lives in both the world wars and all the wars since.
As is done at Acts of Remembrance the world over, we will begin by reading the Ode of Remembrance, which is taken from the poem For the Fallen by Lawrence Bingham.
A bugle will then sound to mark the beginning of the silence, and again to let us know when the silence is over.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Thank you for taking part in our Silence to Remember.
It is our hope as young people that by taking time to remember at such an event as this Remembrance Assembly here today, maybe, just maybe, we could become the generation that is finally able to learn the lessons of the past.
A generation that can realise the futility of war, finally understands that when war happens, humanity loses and innocents die.
A generation that will turn from darkness to light.
Turn from hatred to love.
Turn from war to peace.
By us stopping to remember the impact of war, we hope that we can learn from the mistake of the past and maybe war will not happen so readily in the future.
On this 103rd anniversary year of the end of the First World War, Primary 6 has been learning about the First World War and how it affected all those who served a huge impact on families and communities up and down this land.
At the time when World War I broke out, ordinary people in this country had very little idea of what war was really like.
Back in 1914, we didn't have television news like we do today. Newspapers didn't carry graphic photos of what happened in war. We had very little information.
As a result of this, most people had a very romanticised notion of war as a noble and proud thing that would build character and allow you to make something of yourself.
There was a quite positive and largely unrealistic impression of what war was that largely ignored any notion of suffering and death.
In 1914, people widely spoke of the war being over by Christmas of that year, 1914.
In December 1914, something happened in the trenches that was never to happen again.
In one trench, German and British soldiers decided to stop fighting and have their own truce for a short time for Christmas, recognising their shared humanity in the midst of the ugliness of war.
By the order of military commanders, this was an action that was never allowed to be repeated.
P6 would now like to sing a song written about this very event all together now.
As a part of our study of the First World War, Primary 6 have looked at some of the war poets of this time.
We would like to tell you a little about Wilfred Owen today, a man whose life was forever changed by war and who had a lasting impact on our understanding of what war was really like.
Wilfred Owen was born on 18th of March 1893 in a small town on the Welsh border.
In September 1915, nearly a year after the United Kingdom and Germany had gone to war, Owen returned to England from France, where he had been teaching, uncertain to us whether he should enlist to serve the army.
By October, he had enlisted, and on 29th December 1916, he left for France.
At first, Owen's views about war were very similar to most people in Britain. One of his first letters home to his mother he wrote from the war.
There is a fine, heroic feeling about being in France.
On July 6, 1917, as he began to experience the real conditions of trench warfare, his feelings about war began to change, become more realistic.
He wrote about having to wade through 2.5 miles of trench, which had 2 feet or 60 centimetres of filthy muddy water in them, while carrying a full pack of army supplies, and about the men for whom it was just too much.
By January 9th, Owen was housed in a hut about 60 metres away from a gun that was firing every minute, 24 hours a day.
Owen endured many life-threatening situations over the next few months, such as being stuck with his men under enemy fire for 4 days and nights in an open field stuck in snow, with no support forces, no chance to change out of their wet frozen clothes or even to sleep.
In April, in his letter home to his mother, Owen wrote,
For 12 days I did not wash my face nor take off my boots, nor sleep a deep sleep. For 12 days in holes where at any moment a shell might put us out.
One night, while asleep, Owen was blown into the air by the explosion of a nearby shell.
All of these experiences led Owen to be sent to Craiglock Heart Hospital near Edinburgh in June 1917 to be treated for shell shock, what we now call PTSD.
It was in hospital Owen met another poet, Siegfried Sassoon, who encouraged him to write poetry about his experience of war.
Wilfred Owen wrote many poems to tell of the horror of war. Poems that changed the view of war, made people realise just how horrible war is.
Poems that, because they were written from his own real experiences, have great power in revealing just what war was really like.
It is important at a time of remembrance such as this. We remember the sacrifice made by the brave members of our armed forces, but also that we look at war.
Owen's experiences in the First World War changed his opinion on war, made him want to convince people that war should not be the answer, and that in war all sides lose.
Owen left hospital and returned to the fight on the front line in August 1918.
Wilfred Owen was killed in action almost exactly 1 week before the guns fell silent on the Western Front, and the First World War ended at 11 a.m. on 11th November 1918.
Like so many that we remember here today, he gave his life to preserve our freedom.
He also left a legacy for future generations in the poetry he wrote about war.
Anthem for Doomed Youth by Wilfred Owen. What passing bells for these who die as cattle? Only the monstrous anger of the guns, only the stuttering rifle's rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orisons. No mockeries now for them, no prayers nor bells, nor any voice of mourning save the choirs, the shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells, and bugles calling for them from sad shires.
What candles may be held to speed them all, not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes, shall shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall, their flowers the tenderness of patient minds, and each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds.
Thank you for joining us for our Virtual Remembrance Assembly 2021. When you go home from school, maybe you could share some of the things we've talked about here today and maybe take a few moments to remember.
We would like to close our time of remembrance by singing together a song that was often sung during the war to lift people's spirits and to make people feel that things will someday get better.
Please now join us in singing It's a Long Way to Tipperary.